Caleb returned bearing the scars of a fight and a box of Nashville hot chicken. He dropped the box on the small dorm room table without ceremony, pulled out Liam's desk chair, and collapsed into it. He stated plainly that he needed Liam to take care of his wounds first. Seeing the state of him, the deep grazes and the grim set of his jaw, Liam deduced he'd been street racing again. He suggested that Caleb's injuries warranted a trip to the hospital. Caleb refused. He peeled off his jacket and t-shirt with a practiced indifference, revealing a landscape of fresh abrasions across his torso and shoulders, and insisted they were just superficial. Liam let out a sigh of familiar resignation, setting aside the pajamas and washcloth he'd been about to take to the showers, and retrieved the plastic first aid kit from under his sink. Just as Liam dabbed a cotton swab with antiseptic, Caleb's hand shot out, his fingers wrapping around Liam's wrist. Before Liam could form a question, a roguish glint sparked in Caleb's eyes. With a pull that was surprisingly gentle, he brought Liam tumbling onto his lap. Caleb remarked that standing seemed tiring. Even with Liam's weight pressing down on the scrapes along his thighs, Caleb's expression remained unchanged. Liam told him to do as he pleased. He wasn't the one in pain. After the last bandage was applied, Liam struggled to get up and put the kit away. Caleb didn't stop him this time, rising as well to rummage through Liam's desk drawers for a plate and fork. Caleb had a particularity about only eating food that was properly served. The most elaborate, expensive takeout containers were, in his view, merely vessels for transport. He'd once declared that people who ate straight from the container were merely surviving, not living, a sentiment befitting his status as the heir to the Vance fortune. This, however, never stopped him from paying extra for premium packaging, a waste of money that made Liam inwardly groan. He could have used that cash. He was barely surviving as it was. A question from Caleb broke the silence. Liam turned his head to see what he was holding. It was a thin plastic stick. 2 stark pink lines blazed on its tiny screen. A heavy pulse throbbed in Liam's temple. He'd forgotten to dispose of it. His body moved before his brain could catch up. He snatched it from Caleb's hand and buried it deep in the trash can, mumbling that it was a rapid test for the flu that was going around campus. Caleb raised a skeptical eyebrow, observing that it didn't look like any flu test he'd ever seen. Liam insisted it was a new model, using the supposed contagion as a reason for Caleb to keep his distance. Caleb just scoffed, his hand moving to the back of Liam's neck, gently but firmly guiding him closer until their noses were almost touching, their breaths mingling in the charged space between them. He asked rhetorically if Liam really thought he was afraid of catching a bug. Tilting his head, he began to lower his mouth toward Liam's. Liam turned away at the last second, Caleb's lips brushing against the shell of his ear. Caleb froze, his voice low as he asked if Liam didn't want this. Liam confirmed that he didn't. Caleb reminded him that it wasn't as if they hadn't kissed before. Liam countered that the first time had been a misunderstanding. 3 months ago, on the first night Caleb had actually moved into the dorm, he had stumbled out of the bathroom in a half-asleep haze and climbed into Liam's bed. When a startled Liam tried to correct him, Caleb had simply pressed him back into the mattress and kissed him for what felt like an hour. Afterward, Caleb had explained that he was disoriented by the new environment and thought he was in his old bedroom with his ex. Liam had accepted the explanation. Caleb then brought up the incident in the bathroom, noting that Liam hadn't pulled away then, either. That time had been Liam's fault. He'd gotten shampoo in his eyes and, stumbling blindly for a towel, had careened right into Caleb. He clarified that their lips had met by chance, and one thing had simply led to another. Caleb lost patience with the verbal gymnastics. He cupped Liam's chin, forcing him to meet his gaze, and proposed they have another chance encounter. This time, however, it was profoundly inopportune. A wave of nausea surged through Liam, and he gagged. Caleb froze, a look of sheer disbelief washing over his features. He asked if Liam was disgusted by him. Of course not. Liam wanted to deny it, but another dry heave betrayed him. The atmosphere in the room thickened, becoming heavy and static. It was just an involuntary biological response, devoid of any subjective intent, but Caleb clearly didn't see it that way. He released Liam and took 2 steps back. Liam tried to salvage the situation, apologizing and suggesting that Caleb should find someone else. For some reason, this remark ignited a fresh fury in Caleb's eyes. He let out a cold, harsh laugh, grabbed his shirt, and stormed out, his teeth clenched. Liam, fearing he would go tear up the asphalt in one of his reckless drives, called out a reminder about his injuries. The only response was the violent slam of the door. Liam stood motionless for a long time before slowly sinking back into his chair. He reached into the trash, retrieved the small bag containing the pregnancy test, and tied the knot tighter. Caleb didn't know that beyond the misunderstandings and coincidences, there had been one other incident, an accident, one that had resulted in a life that had no right to exist growing inside him. How could a man get pregnant? That was the question he had posed to the doctor. The doctor had explained that his physiology was unusual, showing him diagrams and case studies to help him understand. But Liam hadn't absorbed a single word. His world had fractured, the ground giving way beneath him. His mind was a high-pitched hum, and all he could see was the doctor's mouth moving. The final instruction was that it was too early to terminate. He would have to wait at least another 2 weeks. Liam didn't have the heart to tell him that after paying for the specialist consultation and the battery of tests, he was completely broke. His last internship paycheck had been wired home to his stepfather, and he knew that money would never be returned. At least he had 2 weeks to save. And at least Caleb had left the hot chicken. He wouldn't go hungry tonight. He was certain Caleb wouldn't return, but after a moment's hesitation, he still set aside half of the food. Caleb had mentioned once that this particular place used young, free-range chickens, which made the meat incredibly tender and juicy, with skin that shattered like glass, topped with a dollop of spicy aioli. Liam resisted for a long while before picking up another piece. He had just put it in his mouth when the door swung open. The shock nearly made him choke. It was Caleb, holding a large plastic pharmacy bag, his expression just as stormy as when he had left. His eyes flickered to the remaining chicken, his tone dripping with sarcasm as he asked if Liam found him disgusting, but not his food. Liam struggled to swallow, then explained in a hoarse voice that he wasn't disgusted at all. He just hadn't been feeling well. Caleb's features softened slightly. He told Liam to come take some medicine. So he had gone to buy medication. Liam admitted he hadn't expected him to come back. Caleb shot back, asking where else he would go. Liam suggested Caleb's own home. At that, Caleb's gaze darkened, a severe glint appearing in his eyes as he stated that he and his family had had another falling out. Liam was surprised. Caleb had been assigned to the same dorm suite since freshman year, but he'd only started living there during their final semester. As the scion of a dynasty built on ruthless corporate takeovers, he had disdained even the university's private single rooms, let alone a shared double. His presence wasn't a matter of sudden appreciation for campus life, but the result of a blow-up with his formidable father, who had frozen his CR cards and seized his condo. It was an act of both necessity and defiance. His usual circle of wealthy friends, intimidated by the Vance family's power, had been too afraid to help him. So it fell to Liam, a relative stranger, who was unconstrained by such pressures. He had stretched his meager internship earnings, secretly using a forbidden hot plate to cook for Caleb every day. This period of shared hardship had lasted for weeks, until Caleb's family butler, unable to bear watching him live like that, had begun covertly funding him. By last month, the relationship with his family had seemed almost mended. They had even thrown Caleb a lavish 21st birthday party, to which Liam had been invited. The accident had happened that night. Caleb, his consciousness clouded by something more than alcohol, had pulled Liam into a vacant room, and they had spent the entire night tangled together. Now, less than a month later, they had fought again. Seeing that Caleb didn't want to elaborate, Liam didn't press him. Caleb had bought a pile of antibiotics, enough to make a healthy person sick. Liam subconsciously covered his stomach. He noticed Caleb's gaze follow the movement and quickly moved his hand away, claiming he'd already taken medicine that night. When Caleb asked what he'd taken, Liam rattled off a few obscure drug names, confident Caleb wouldn't know the difference, and warned that mixing them could be dangerous. Caleb studied him for a long moment before nodding slightly. Liam thought he'd relented, but then Caleb said something startling. He announced that he was going to touch Liam. Before Liam could react, the back of Caleb's hand was against his forehead, a cool sensation seeping into his skin. Caleb observed that Liam's temperature felt a little high and warned that if it didn't go down, he'd have to switch to the medicine Caleb bought. The ghost of Caleb's touch lingered on his forehead, leaving Liam slightly stunned. It was strange to see someone so untamed and willful suddenly acting with such restraint, all because of 2 dry heaves. This sentiment, however, didn't last the night. When Caleb got up to use the bathroom, he repeated his old trick, sliding into Liam's bed. The kiss Liam had deflected earlier finally found its mark. Caleb's voice was a low murmur against his lips, asking if Liam truly had no idea how he felt. Liam feigned sleep, keeping his breathing even and his eyelashes still. He felt Caleb's intense gaze on his face for a long time before Caleb bit his earlobe, a gesture of frustrated affection, and whispered that he wanted him so badly it hurt. Liam lay perfectly still until he heard Caleb's breathing deepen into a steady rhythm. Only then did he slowly open his eyes. If he had heard those words before that night at the party, he would have been overjoyed. There had been so many times he could have pushed Caleb away, but he never did. He'd more than tolerated it. He'd savored it. Over the past 3 months, he had fallen for Caleb. His easy strength, his brash confidence, his carefully measured advances, the intoxicating ambiguity that danced on the edge of a relationship. It was all fatally attractive to Liam. But waking up in Caleb's arms that morning, naively believing it was the start of something real, he had overheard a conversation between Caleb's father and their butler that sealed their fate. His father was instructing the butler to give their finest hospitality to Caleb's fiancée, whose flight had been delayed, preventing her from attending the birthday party. She was arriving on the first flight in the morning. Living the simple life of a roommate with Caleb, Liam had forgotten. A mouse can't live in the light. A massive liner, glittering as it cuts through the waves, continues on its predetermined course. A broken little lifeboat, after a brief, chance encounter, can only sink silently beneath the surface. With his next internship check still over 2 weeks away, Liam took on another job to save money faster. A night shift at the campus convenience store paid $18 an hour, with a $1.50 bonus for the graveyard shift. It was criminally cheap labor, but the one perk was that he could take home expired sandwiches and meals that were scheduled to be thrown out. His schedule became brutal. He'd work his internship during the day, head straight to the C-store, and then return to the dorm to work on his thesis until the early hours of the morning, surviving on 4 hours of sleep. The dorm's resident advisor, a kind middle-aged woman, knew his shift ended a half-hour after curfew and often left the main door unlocked for him. She would tell him to hang in there, that things would get better after graduation. He believed her. He just had to endure a little longer. Then life delivered a sudden, crushing blow. Hearing that Liam planned to rent an apartment near the office after graduation, his HR manager pulled him aside. After some hesitation, she gently broke the news. The company was having a bad year. His internship would not be converted into a full-time position. Once he graduated, he was out. She said she was telling him now so he could make other plans. He was grateful for the heads up. At least he hadn't completely missed the spring hiring season. But now he had to divide his already limited energy between job fairs and interviews. On the surface, he was calm, but inside, a part of him had already given up. He continued his routine, smiling and telling his colleagues he'd see them tomorrow before squeezing onto the sweltering evening subway, a quiet cloud of despair surrounding him. Today was particularly bad. While wiping down a shelf at the store, he fumbled and dropped 2 bottles of artisanal hard cider, which shattered on the tile floor. A whole day's wages gone. After sweeping up the sticky, glittering shards, he stood staring into the trash can. The pressure was immense. He found himself wishing someone would drug Caleb again, like they had at the party. Just for one more night, so he could pretend the chasm between their worlds didn't exist, that Caleb didn't have a fiancée. His phone vibrated, interrupting the fantasy. It was a text from Caleb. He asked why Liam wasn't in the dorm and noted that the medicine was still unopened. The morning after Caleb had returned with the chicken, he had taken a long call on the balcony, coming back inside smelling of the cool, damp air of early spring. He had to fly to Italy to handle some messy business left behind by his grandfather. He had asked Liam, who was pretending to be asleep, if he was going to keep up the act even if Caleb might die over there. Liam had wrestled with himself, but by the time he decided to respond, Caleb was already gone. There had been no word for a whole week. It was a relief, one of the few good things that had happened lately. Liam texted back that he was working late. A few seconds later, another message appeared. Caleb questioned what kind of internship required an intern to work overtime. Then, a new message, send his location. Caleb said he would pick him up, that he was with some friends Liam should meet. The university was the last thin veil over their class differences. After graduation, the gap between the sky and the mud would become a chasm. Integrating into Caleb's social circle felt pointless. He wouldn't even have a connection to Caleb himself for much longer. He replied that it wasn't necessary and that he was busy, then shoved his phone back into his pocket to earn his last $18 of the night. Nearing the end of his shift, as he was counting the register, the automatic doors slid open with a chime. A wave of boisterous noise from a group of young men and women washed in, and Liam froze. Amid the clamor, he instantly recognized Caleb's voice. He was telling someone not to mess around. The words were directed at a handsome, fine-featured young man. Liam's scalp tightened. The urge to flee was overwhelming, but it was too late. After speaking, Caleb turned his head, and their eyes met. The faint smile on his lips froze, and his expression slowly hardened. He demanded to know if this was what Liam called working late. Caleb's presence was so commanding that the group fell silent. Their eyes, bold and undisguised, raked over Liam, making his skin crawl. He pulled off his uniform polo and nodded to the student arriving for the next shift, saying he was leaving. But he couldn't leave. He had to fill out an incident report for the 2 broken bottles. Fortunately, the group's attention soon shifted elsewhere, alleviating some of the discomfort. But Caleb remained at the counter, unmoving, demanding an explanation for the lie. The explanation was simple. He needed the money. He had considered asking Caleb for a loan, but while money could be repaid, the debt of a favor couldn't. He didn't want any more entanglements. After a tense standoff, Caleb relented first. He asked if Liam's flu was better. Liam said it was, and Caleb noted that he hadn't caught it. Liam offered a dry remark about Caleb's robust constitution. Caleb was about to say more when a sharp cry interrupted him. He flinched, his expression faltering for a second before he spun around and ran toward the sound. Liam followed to see the handsome young man on the floor. He had somehow fallen near a corner display, and a sharp edge of the shelving had cut his ankle. Liam turned to his coworker, asking if the floor had just been mopped. The student shook his head, saying he hadn't gotten to it yet. There was no time to analyze the cause. The wound needed attention. Liam offered to get the first aid kit. But Caleb, his face a cold mask, brushed everyone aside and bent down to lift the man into his arms. The group immediately erupted in a chorus of teasing hoots, the sound piercingly loud in the small store. The young man, draped over Caleb's shoulder, murmured that he hated Caleb's school. He then cast a subtle, triumphant glance in Liam's direction, a look of playful complaint that Liam could never master. Caleb's tone was flat as he replied that he had told him not to come. He seemed not to have heard Liam's offer about the first aid kit and strode toward the exit. The cut was minor, something the store's emergency kit could easily handle, but Caleb was clearly not taking any chances. The way his hands were firmly clasped around the man's waist, the easy way the man's arms were around his neck, Caleb's obvious concern. The intimacy was undeniable. This was someone important. As Caleb passed, he paused, his voice low. He told Liam to leave the door unlocked for him tonight. Liam didn't answer. He just stepped aside to let them pass. The spot where the man fell was a blind spot for the security camera. Liam replayed the footage over and over, but he couldn't figure out how it happened. Unsure if he would be held responsible, he saved the recording just in case. Leaving the store, he was bone-weary. Caleb's car was parked outside the dorm building. He was leaning against the door, the tip of a cigarette glowing in the dark. Liam had never seen him smoke before. His mood must have been truly foul. Was he waiting to demand accountability for the man's minor, self-healing scratch? Liam rubbed his temples and walked over. He began to say that he would take responsibility for what happened during his shift, but Caleb cut him off with a sudden, cold laugh. The rest of Liam's words died in his throat. He didn't understand the meaning of that laugh. Caleb looked up, the ferocity in his face stark even in the dim light. He said bitterly that now Liam was talking about responsibility. Before Liam could finish saying he was always responsible, a small, white rectangular object hit his face with a soft thud and fell to the ground. He knew instantly what it was. Caleb must have taken the man to the 24-hour pharmacy down the street from the campus, the same one where Liam had bought his pregnancy test. Perhaps because he was so exhausted, he didn't have the energy to panic. He closed his eyes and bent to pick it up. A hand clamped down on the back of his neck, the grip so strong it forced a grunt of pain from him. He was wrenched into an uncomfortable position, face to face with Caleb, whose dark eyes were churning with a searing rage. Caleb's voice was a low growl. "Liam, who did you knock up?" Liam said nothing. Caleb's grip tightened, his teeth clenched. He spat the words, asking how Liam could lie about having the flu, how he never knew Liam was such a good actor. He accused him of not thinking about protection, asking if he was too poor to even buy a condom. Liam just looked at him silently. Caleb's expression shifted to a sneer. "Right, I forgot," he mocked. "Of course you couldn't afford it." You're working nights at a convenience store. You're going to be broke for the rest of your life, Liam." His words were like knives, but they were also the truth. This was his life. Caleb released him, slammed his car door, and peeled away with a squeal of tires, not giving him a second glance. The RA was woken by the noise, her initial annoyance turning to concern when she saw Liam. She told him to take care of himself, that life was a marathon, not a sprint. Liam picked up the pregnancy test, shoved it in his pocket, and offered her a sincere apology. He was so tired he practically crawled up the 4 flights of stairs. When he opened the door to their room, he was hit by the cloying scent of expensive candy. Caleb had gone on his business trip and had still thought to bring him back souvenirs. Liam sat at his desk, staring at the pile of gourmet chocolates and sweets. He finally picked up a bar that looked like the cheapest one, slowly tore open the wrapper, and put a piece in his mouth. It was bitter. If happiness was chocolate, then he was allergic. Caleb never came back. A person like him never had to worry about survival. If the Vance family hadn't faced a minor crisis years ago that restricted his travel, he never would have ended up at this ordinary state university. And he never would have met Liam. Life went on, a frantic blur of work that left no time for stray thoughts. 2 weeks passed quickly. At the very end of the hiring season, Liam received a satisfactory job offer. After completing his exit paperwork at his old internship, the HR manager expressed her relief that things had worked out for him. Liam asked if he could get his final paycheck early. She blinked and said that wasn't possible. It was fine. He had saved up enough for the procedure by then. His thesis was finalized, awaiting defense. He had some time before his new job started, and the man from the convenience store never came looking for trouble. It was good. Everything was good. On his way back to campus, he scheduled a doctor's appointment for the following week. Seeing the confirmation message, the tension that had been coiled in his shoulders for months finally began to unwind. The path had been rocky, a significant detour from his original plans, but it seemed he was finally, precariously, back on track. Before heading back to the dorm, he bought milk and fruit as a thank you for the RA's kindness. With graduation looming, the dorm building was half empty, with students constantly moving out. It would all be over soon. For unremarkable years and 3 dreamlike months. It was good. Everything was good. He was taking the stairs 2 at a time when his phone rang. The word home flashed on the screen, and the lightness in his chest instantly turned to lead. A voice in his head screamed at him not to answer. "Don't pick up, Liam." His fingers trembled, and as he tried to hit decline, the phone slipped from his grasp, clattering on the concrete steps and accidentally answering the call. A man's voice barked through the speaker, asking if he was deaf. His joints locked up. He slowly crouched down, his mind numb. He asked what the man wanted. He already knew the answer but clung to a desperate, foolish hope. What if this time was different? What if he'd had a change of heart? Wire me some money. Of course, there was no other possibility. Liam picked up the phone, his hand clenched around it. For the first time, he didn't want to obey. He stated that he had just sent money, that he had none left. The voice on the other end was silent for a moment, then let out a derisive laugh, saying that if he had no money, he should find a way. Liam repeated that there was no way. The man on the other end sneered. "Fine. I'll go to your sister." Liam's eyes widened. She was in middle school. What money could she possibly have? The man's laughter was demonic, each word a hammer blow against his eardrums. He said, "She is the money." His breath hitched, and the world went dark around him. He fought back the urge to vomit. His own voice sounded distant, alien. Don't. He heard himself promise to send the money. $631. Every last cent. Staring at his empty bank account, a thought took root in his mind. Maybe he shouldn't go through with the termination. He could carry it to term, deliver it secretly in a public restroom like in the news stories, and leave it. Leave it in some dark corner where no one would see and just walk away. The thought horrified him. How was that any different from what his own parents had done? They had left him in a patch of reeds by the river. The old village bachelor who found him had also taken in 2 older girls and 1 younger one. It sounded like a heartwarming story, but only they knew the truth. He was a monster. He collected government subsidies for each of them, then immediately gambled it all away. The oldest sister was married off as soon as she was of age. The second disappeared the day after he lost big and was being chased by crows. Liam had lied about getting a job out of town, using student loans to go to college instead. He thought he could slowly escape the man's grasp, but today he understood. He would never be free. He lay in his dorm for 2 days, the world silent around him. Just as he thought he might sleep forever, his phone rang. He reflexively pulled the blanket over his head, his body shaking with fear. The ringing stopped after a minute. Before he could recover, it started again. After this happened twice more, he slowly peeked out. This persistent, it couldn't be from home. As soon as he picked up the phone, the call ended. It was Caleb. He stared at the screen, bewildered. What could he possibly want? Everything between them should have been over. As he was thinking, the phone rang again. This time he answered. There was silence on the other end, just the sound of uneven breathing laced with restrained anger. Caleb finally spoke, his voice tight, asking why it took him so long to answer. Liam said he was sleeping. Caleb informed him that he had moved out. The utility company had sent Caleb the overdue electric bill for the dorm room. That explained why the lights hadn't worked for the past 2 days. Liam had just assumed the bulb was burnt out. Hearing no response, Caleb's voice grew sharper. He asked if Liam was living with that woman now. There didn't seem to be any point in denying it. A misunderstanding was fine. His silence was met with a long pause from Caleb. So long, in fact, that Liam thought he had hung up. But the screen was still lit. Finally, Caleb's voice came through, raw and wounded. Liam, what the hell am I to you? The screen went dark. No one had ended the call. His phone had died. He lay there a while longer. Suddenly, the overhead light flickered on. The sudden brightness was painful, and he closed his stinging eyes. He forced himself to stare at the light, then climbed out of bed. He couldn't die here. It would be a hassle for the RA. He plugged in his phone. When it turned on, there were 0 unread messages. It seemed paying the electric bill was Caleb's final act of charity. Caleb didn't even show up for the graduation ceremony. His belongings in the room were few but expensive. Liam wondered what he planned to do with them. He quietly packed his own things, taking a bag of trash downstairs. 2 classmates were dragging their suitcases out of the building. They saw him and waved. For the past 4 years, any time not spent in class was spent at various part-time jobs. He knew fewer than 5 people in his graduating class by name, but even these near strangers offered a farewell. He noticed their gazes linger on his midsection for a moment, and he self-consciously tugged at his shirt. It was growing so fast. The bump was now noticeable. The signing bonus from his new job had all gone to the security deposit and first month's rent. Once again, there was no money to deal with this thing that was probably a life now. He stood there for a moment, processing his anxiety, then turned to go back inside. A voice called out from behind him. A man asked if he could have a few minutes of his time. Liam stopped, looking at him with suspicion. The man wore a black silk shirt. His hair was slicked back with gel, and he was drenched in a strong, cheap cologne. He seemed to have been loitering there for a while. Liam took a step back instinctively, but the man moved closer with a greasy smile. He asked if Liam had found a job yet, offering an easy gig if he hadn't. Was this a recruiter? Hanging around the dorms at night? Liam's guard went up. He shook his head repeatedly, saying he already had a job. The man blocked his path, insisting it could be a side hustle. He said that with Liam's good looks, it was a waste not to capitalize on them. Liam understood. This was not a legitimate offer. He thanked the man and said he wasn't interested. As he tried to step past, the man grabbed his wrist. He urged Liam to just hear him out, pointing to his car and offering to show him. He promised to bring him back if he wasn't interested. Liam told him to let go. The man's grip was surprisingly strong. As Liam reached for his phone, a fist flew past his ear. The sickening thud of knuckle hitting bone exploded in front of him. The man's head snapped to the side. He dropped the pretense and lunged forward with a snarl, but his expression froze into one of terror when he saw who was standing next to Liam. He stammered Caleb's family name. Caleb slammed the man to the ground, his voice like ice as he asked which crew he belonged to. The man pleaded that it was all a misunderstanding. Caleb started counting down from 3. The man babbled that he didn't know this was one of Caleb's people. Caleb said 2. The man shrieked for mercy. Caleb looked almost disappointed as he applied more pressure. The man on the ground groaned in agony before finally spitting out 2 names. Hearing them, Caleb paused, and in that moment of hesitation, the man scrambled free and ran. It had been a while since Liam had seen him. The reckless energy around Caleb had settled, but the dangerous edge had only sharpened. Liam tried to walk around him. He would just go to his new apartment tonight. Caleb couldn't force his way in there, but Caleb stopped him, asking where he was going. Liam replied that he was going home. The word hung in the air. Caleb's tone was dangerously soft. Home? To her? He spun Liam around, his arm locking around his shoulders, and steered him firmly toward the dorm. Liam struggled, protesting that he wasn't going back, a premonition of what might happen prickling his skin. Caleb's grip only tightened. He asked if the first aid kit was still there, explaining that he was hurt. So they went upstairs. The so-called injury was a scraped knuckle from the punch. As Liam applied antiseptic, Caleb hissed in pain. His previous injuries had been far worse, and he had never made a sound. Had his technique changed? Liam asked if it hurt badly. Caleb retorted that even if it did, Liam wouldn't care. Combined with the earlier drama, Liam suspected he was acting. He asked if Caleb had hired the man to play a part. Caleb's expression turned cold as he denied it, promising he would get Liam an explanation for the man's motives. Then he changed the subject, taking Liam's hand and insisting that for safety, Liam should stay with him for now. Liam knew he had to leave. He pulled his hand away, packed up the first aid kit, and grabbed his suitcase from under the desk. Caleb just watched him, silent. This was too strange. As Liam reached the door, he was suddenly lifted off his feet. Before he could process it, Caleb had swung him around and set him down on the desk. This was definitely a trap. He told Caleb not to be crazy. Caleb ignored him, pressing between his legs, a heavy, unmovable weight. Liam told him to let him go. Caleb replied, "In your dreams." Liam called him a bastard. Caleb agreed that he was. He buried his face in the crook of Liam's neck, inhaling deeply. "Liam," he murmured, his voice thick with something Liam couldn't name. "I missed you so much." A knot formed in Liam's chest, a painful, bittersweet ache spreading through him. He found himself wrapping his arms around Caleb before he realized what he was doing and quickly let go. Caleb stiffened, then pulled back to look at him, a flicker of surprised hope in his eyes. He told Liam there were no misunderstandings, no coincidences. He said, his voice urgent, "You like me too, don't you? What happened with her was an accident, something you felt obligated to deal with, right?" Liam forced himself to look away, denying it. Caleb clearly didn't believe him. He promised he could compensate the woman, give her anything she wanted, except for Liam. He begged Liam to stay with him, but there was already someone by his side. Standing there, Liam would just be an extra, an immoral presence. Being Caleb's mistress was no different from going with that man to a nightclub. He was silhouetted against the light, and Liam couldn't read his expression. The rough palm that cupped his cheek was slightly abrasive, a friction that carried a strange, forbidden pleasure. It was impossible not to remember that chaotic night, how these same hands had explored every inch of his body. He tried to stifle the groan rising in his throat, but when he spoke, his voice was thin and reedy. "Caleb." The rest was swallowed by Caleb's mouth. The kiss was domineering, stealing all the oxygen from his lungs until his head swam. In a hazy fog, he felt the buttons of his shirt being undone, one by one. A hand slid inside, kneading his chest without any gentleness before moving down. When it reached his lower abdomen, Liam jolted back to awareness. Caleb stopped too, breathing heavily, and looked down at the slight swell beneath his palm. He murmured, confused, "You're so skinny. How is your stomach?" Liam scrambled to push him away, his hands fumbling to rebutton his shirt. But Caleb, pushed away, wasn't angry. His face reflected a panic and tension that mirrored Liam's own. He asked, his voice strained, "Liam, are you sick?" Liam denied it frantically, claiming he'd just gained weight from overeating and that he had to go. Caleb held him in place with one hand, using the other to lift his shirt and touch his stomach again. The touch was light, almost trembling. "Liam," he said, his voice firm, "we're going to the hospital." Liam started to refuse, but Caleb cut him off, his tone leaving no room for argument. To the hospital. He knew he couldn't escape it. Caleb straightened Liam's clothes and turned to get his car keys. Liam watched his back, then closed his eyes. "Caleb." Caleb didn't turn. "Whatever you say right now, it doesn't matter. We have to. I'm pregnant." The keys clattered to the floor. "What did you just say?" In the Vance family's private hospital, Liam finally understood the reason his birth parents had abandoned him. A congenital chromosomal anomaly. An extra chromosome on the 23rd pair had resulted in a complete set of internal female reproductive organs. He was a freak. It had gone unnoticed because the organs had been undeveloped, but recent external stimuli and hormonal surges had brought them to full function. The doctor presented two options: surgery to remove the organs, allowing him to retain his male identity, or hormonal therapy to preserve the pregnancy. The answer should have been simple. It had to be, but a sharp pain lanced through his heart. He hesitated. Caleb had been chain-smoking at the end of the hall. When he entered the room, he leaned against the wall in silence. After a long while, he sat on the edge of the bed, picked up the paring knife from the nightstand, and began to slowly peel an apple. He told Liam the surgeons here were the best in the world, that the procedure was low risk and he shouldn't worry. Liam didn't speak. He studied Caleb's face carefully before hesitantly asking if he could borrow some money. The apple peel snapped. Caleb looked at him, his expression neutral, but the veins on the back of his hand stood out in sharp relief. He said it wasn't necessary, that he would cover the surgery and all subsequent recovery costs. The meaning was clear. But I want to keep. Liam. Caleb's voice shot up, sharp and loud. Snap out of it. That's the child of a rapist. A suffocating tightness seized Liam's chest. He gripped the bedsheets, his voice a small whisper as he refuted the claim. He wasn't. The room fell silent. The anger on Caleb's face slowly morphed into disbelief. His voice trembled when he asked, "You were willing?" He was the one asking the question. But as Liam opened his mouth to answer, Caleb clapped a hand over it. Unable to speak, Liam simply nodded. Caleb slowly lowered his hand. A long, heavy silence passed. Who? He demanded to know who it was. He said he would pay for everything, that he would raise the bastard, but he had to know who the man was. Liam looked up at Caleb's furious face and pressed his lips together. If Caleb knew the truth, the Vance family would certainly force him to give up the child. He didn't want that. It was a strange feeling. In his short 20-something years, he'd never had love, family, or money that was truly his. But now, there was a life inside him that belonged only to him. Caleb was piecing things together aloud. He calculated that in the month of the conception, they had been together every day, except for his birthday when he'd blacked out. The butler had told him Liam left with someone else that night, but Caleb couldn't find any record of whose car he had gotten into. He demanded to know who Liam had connected with him about the kind of dangerous, predatory people who attended those parties. Liam slowly retreated under the covers, his voice muffled. Caleb, there's no future for me and that person. It's okay if you won't lend me the money. I'll figure something out myself. Caleb conceded. The condition was that Liam had to live at his house. When Liam refused, mentioning his apartment and his new job, Caleb made another offer. He'd buy a condo near Liam's office, just for the two of them. It felt too much like being a kept man. Liam kept shaking his head. Caleb's face hardened. He reminded Liam exactly who he was, that if he wanted to force him onto an operating table, there were a million ways to do it. He was right. They finally reached a compromise. Liam would stay in his own apartment, but Caleb would have a key and could come over anytime without being stopped. And Liam had to spend at least one night a week at Caleb's estate. It wasn't ideal, but at least Liam retained some control. The next day, a large sum of money appeared in Liam's account. The transfer note read, "Voluntary gift." Liam texted him, pointing out that it was a loan, not a gift. Caleb replied a moment later, "This month's pacification fee for the bastard. Let him see what his stepdad's got so he doesn't give you trouble." A sour pang went through him. If only Caleb didn't have a fiancée. He couldn't imagine how happy he would be. A moment later, another transfer came through. "You don't have to repay the principal, but I will be collecting interest." Liam pulled out his calculator and did some quick math. It seemed Caleb was after his salary. That night, however, when Caleb came over and pushed him against the wall in the entryway, kissing him until his knees went weak, Liam understood what kind of interest he meant. Too weak to stand, he was carried into the bedroom. Thankfully, his condition meant Caleb couldn't go too far, though he did manage to leave him breathless and thoroughly kissed. Late that night, Liam was in the kitchen making a late-night snack. In the quiet apartment, the only sound was the bubbling of the pot. He stared at the blue flame, a sense of unease settling over him. This arrangement couldn't last forever. What would he do when it ended? He pulled up his bank account on his phone. Seeing the balance calmed him. He decided that if he couldn't change the present, he would enjoy it. When Caleb finally married, he would take the money and the baby and disappear. Caleb wrapped his arms around him from behind, nuzzling his chin into Liam's shoulder. "Babe, I'm hungry," he murmured. Liam told him to get the bowls. The bowls were a matching pair Liam had found at a campus thrift shop for $2 on the day Caleb first moved in. He never imagined then that their simple, shared life would blossom into something else entirely. After eating, Caleb started on him again. Liam was exhausted. He asked if Caleb ever got tired of this. Caleb said no, pressing against him suggestively, but admitted it was getting difficult. Liam sighed and parted his legs. "Be gentle." The week passed quickly. After a hospital checkup, Caleb drove him to the Vance estate. Caleb suddenly remarked that his bed was huge. Liam said he knew, remembering how they'd spent a whole night in it and still found dry spots. Caleb glanced at him. "You know?" Liam, now an expert at deadpan fabrication, claimed to have seen it in a dream. Caleb played along, asking if he was in the dream on the bed. Liam just told him to guess. The car purred smoothly into the gated community. Caleb said he wouldn't guess. He would make the dream a reality soon enough. But as they entered the house, Liam saw the young man from the convenience store sitting on the sofa. The dream, it seemed, would be indefinitely postponed. The man stood up, smiling. "Caleb, you're back. I've been waiting for you." His smile faltered when he saw Liam. "Oh, it's you." The convenience store worker. The familiar, subtle hostility was back. Liam knew who he had to be. Caleb's fiancé, Julian. He wanted to disappear. He forced a nod and subtly shifted away from Caleb. Just as Caleb was about to speak, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his brow furrowing. He told Liam to wait for him in his room, that he had to handle something and would be right back. Was it really appropriate to say that in front of his partner? Of course not. Liam didn't go to his room. He sat stiffly on the couch. As soon as Caleb was gone, Julian's smile vanished. He leisurely picked up a teacup, glancing sideways at Liam. He asked if Liam knew that he and Caleb had known each other since birth, and that they were supposed to be engaged in the early fall. Liam felt a hot flush of shame. He pressed his knees together, unsure where to put his hands. He apologized, promising he would leave Caleb as soon as he could. This seemed to surprise Julian. The contemptuous look on his face softened for a moment. He asked if Liam was serious, if he really wanted to leave. When Liam confirmed he did, Julian asked if he truly didn't like Caleb. Liam just said it wasn't important. Julian held out his phone. "Julian, add me. I'll help you." Liam was taken aback. Help him? The sudden change in attitude was jarring. Julian clarified, "Help you get away from him." Skeptically, Liam added his contact information. Julian explained that while the Vance family was powerful, their reach wasn't infinite. He could send Liam somewhere safe until things settled down, then bring him back. The plan felt strangely familiar, though he couldn't place it. When he asked where he would go, Julian's eyes curved into a smile, but his gaze was deep and cold. "Somewhere he can't find you and can't control." Liam was still confused, asking why he would help. Julian's smile widened. "To help myself, of course." Caleb returned shortly after, his face a thunderous mask. He demanded to know where Julian had gone. Liam, startled by his intensity, said he had left. Caleb reached out and touched Liam's cheek, his expression softening. He said he had to go out for a bit and told Liam to go to sleep. Liam's intuition told him Caleb was going after Julian. An unsettling feeling twisted in his gut. He didn't want him to go. He was shocked at his own thought. Was he developing a dependency, or was it just the hormones? Either way, it was terrifying. He was becoming the kind of person he despised. If this continued, He would willingly become one of Caleb's possessions, waiting passively for him to visit. He couldn't let that happen. Caleb didn't return all night. Liam lay on the massive bed, staring at the ceiling until dawn, then decided to go back to his own apartment. On his way out, he ran into the butler, who gave him a slight nod. Liam felt a pang of guilt, remembering how the butler had helped cover for him after the party, and how he had promised not to get entangled with Caleb again. The butler just shook his head and said it was the young master's own choice. Caleb's choice was to placate Liam, then spend the entire night with his actual fiancée. Exhausted, Liam went home and slept until noon. He woke to find Caleb's face next to his on the pillow. His sleep-addled brain couldn't comprehend when he had returned. Caleb had an arm and a leg thrown over him, holding him tight, yet he hadn't woken Liam up. Holding his breath, Liam tried to inch away, but Caleb just pulled him tighter. He couldn't tell if Caleb was awake or asleep, but either way, he began to kiss him blindly, just like that first time he'd mistaken him for his ex. "I want to get married," Caleb mumbled. A dream? The nascent desire stirring within Liam instantly vanished. It was already afternoon. This was just a daydream. "Okay," Liam said flatly. "Go get married." Caleb's eyes opened, clear and alert. A slight smile touched his lips as he took Liam's hand and kissed his fingertips. "Soon," he said. "Not yet. When would that be?" "In the early fall. Reeds bloom in the summer, and by the end of autumn, they wither and die." Caleb must have been exhausted, because he slept until the afternoon. When Liam turned from his laptop, he saw him standing there, still looking half asleep. Liam asked if he was ready for dinner. Caleb said he was starving. He must have made 100 copies of the apartment key, because a chef, a cleaner, and a nutritionist all appeared like ninjas, silently preparing a meal and then disappearing just as quietly. Caleb's table manners were the complete opposite of his personality, elegant and refined. As he was eating, he casually asked why Liam had turned down the job offer. A piece of broccoli fell from Liam's chopsticks. He tried again and it fell again. Caleb calmly picked it up and placed it in Liam's bowl. Liam chewed thoughtfully, then asked how he knew. Caleb just said he knew. Liam explained that he'd suddenly decided he didn't like the job and would find something else. Caleb told him not to bother, asking if Liam thought he couldn't support him. Liam smiled brightly and agreed easily, saying he would happily be supported. He was surprised to see Caleb frown. Caleb asked if he was just saying that. "Of course not," he replied, his gaze steady and deep. "I'm just afraid you're the one who's just saying it." Liam stuffed his cheeks with rice, mimicking Caleb's serious tone as he mumbled, "Of course not." After dinner, the invisible cleaner reappeared, washed the dishes, and vanished. Amazing, Liam marveled. If his staff were this competent, Caleb himself must be even more so. The future head of the Vance dynasty had to be. But it must also be incredibly draining. Wanting to leave no regrets, Liam gathered his courage and asked, "Caleb, what is it you like about me? We're not from the same world." Caleb deadpanned, "You're not from Earth?" Liam clarified that he meant they were from different social circles, different classes. Caleb scoffed, reminding him of a freshman orientation trip where their wealthy classmates had wasted all the supplies and made a mess, and Liam had been the one to salvage the situation with foraged materials. It was one of the few times they had interacted before Caleb moved in. Liam was surprised he remembered. "I like your realness," Caleb said. "The way you live." Liam disagreed. "I'm just surviving." Caleb pulled him into a hug, his voice gentle. "Those 3 months with you were the most peaceful time of my life." Suddenly, Liam remembered all of Caleb's injuries, old and new, and the flat way he'd said he might die in Italy. Maybe they were both just surviving. Caleb assured him that those dangerous situations were in the past. He explained that his father had been so angry because Caleb had been secretly dismantling some of the family's shadier enterprises. Liam asked why they had fought a second time. Caleb said it was because of Julian. Their engagement was arranged by their grandparents. Years ago, Caleb had been kidnapped, and Julian's grandfather had taken a bullet for him. The trip to Italy. Liam suddenly didn't want to hear anymore. He wasn't sure if he didn't want to hear about Julian, or if he didn't want to hear Caleb tear open his old wounds. He interrupted him. Caleb, didn't the doctor say, after 3 months it would be okay to, you know? Caleb stopped mid-sentence, ruffling Liam's hair with an amused look. Don't tempt me. Liam pressed, why not? The doctor said it was fine. The amusement faded from Caleb's eyes. Are you serious? Of course. Caleb's throat worked, his gaze darkening as it dropped to Liam's stomach. Then he shook his head. I'm not an animal. Liam looked down, his face flushing. But I am. His back was already sore from the growing weight in his belly. The next morning, he could barely stand up straight. Beforehand, Caleb had dismissed the security detail he'd stationed around the apartment building. Now, in the dead of night, the silence was absolute. Liam suspected all the other apartments in the building had been quietly rented out. He pulled his jacket tighter and slipped out into the darkness. The black sedan was parked at the corner, just as expected. He walked toward it, toward the new future he had chosen for himself. He pulled open the door and was hit by an overwhelming wave of cheap, strong cologne. Something inside his head snapped. He looked up slowly and saw a familiar face. The man in the black silk shirt who had accosted him outside the dorm. A bolt of lightning seemed to strike his brain. He turned to run, but a hand shot out and yanked him into the car. The door slammed shut, and his heart sank with it. It was over. Julian turned around from the passenger seat. There were several fresh cuts on his face, and his smile was chilling in the moonlight. Liam tried to stay calm, reaching for the door handle. I've changed my mind. Let me out. Of course, the door was locked. He didn't know what had happened, but Julian looked deranged, radiating a suffocating aura of danger. Liam, is it? Let's go to hell together. Who wanted to go to hell with him? Liam fumbled for his phone, but the man in the back seat snatched it away and plunged a knife straight through the screen. The blood drained from Liam's face. Julian, I was already leaving. Why can't you just let me go? He laughed coldly. I let you go? Who's going to let me go? I've been through hell and back with Caleb for 20 years. How long have you known him? Why would he do this to me for you? Do what? Liam had no idea. There was no reasoning with him. He was on the verge of a complete breakdown. Knowing he had to get out of the car or die, Liam started banging on the window. The man in black pinned his arms, rendering him immobile. The entire street was empty. No one could save him. Julian just watched him. Feeling hopeless? This is how I felt when Caleb was done with me. Then he gave the order, drive. 2 words. A death sentence. Liam slumped back in his seat and closed his eyes. But the car didn't move. Julian yelled at the driver, asking if he was deaf. The driver replied calmly, we're not all here yet. Julian was confused. Just then, the car door opened. Caleb climbed in and sat down next to Liam. Now we are. Julian's face went white. He shrieked at the man in the back. What are you waiting for? The man quickly dropped the knife. Boss, I made sure to miss the battery. I practiced this a dozen times. Julian stared, his eyes wide with disbelief. You betrayed me. The man just shrugged. patting Liam's arm. Didn't squeeze too hard, did I? I was being gentle. A glare from Caleb made him shrink back into the corner. Now it was Julian frantically trying the door. Of course, it was locked. Caleb slowly lifted his leg and kicked the back of the passenger seat. Hard. Julian, I gave you a way out. Caleb's second fallout with his family had been over breaking the engagement. As compensation, he had flown abroad to settle some of the Julian's family's old messes. That's when he discovered the truth. The kidnapping had been staged by Julian's grandfather. He had sacrificed himself to save his own failing family dynasty. Out of respect for their long friendship, Caleb had been willing to forgive, as long as Julian gave up his fantasy. But Julian wasn't satisfied. He had tried to lure Liam to a private club to have him ruined. After Caleb had dealt with him severely for that, he still hadn't given up. So you knew I was going to run? Liam's legs were still shaking with fear as Caleb helped him onto the bed back in the apartment. Caleb snorted. When you wired all the money I gave you to your sister, for a moment I was naive enough to think you were finally accepting me. Then you immediately started planning your escape. You've lied to me so many times, I've built up an immunity. Did you really think I was stupid enough not to notice how strange you were acting tonight? Watching him calmly unbutton his cuffs, Liam swallowed hard. Well, all's well that ends well. Let's just go to sleep. Caleb loomed over him, his hand locking on his jaw. Nothing else to say to me? Liam knew it. Tonight was far from over. Before being dragged away, Julian had screamed that if his flight hadn't been delayed that day, he would have been the one in bed with Caleb, and Liam never would have had a chance. Caleb had nearly devoured him right there in the car. Liam, Caleb's voice was a low growl. I always thought that on my birthday. I just had a very vivid dream all night. A searing kiss cut off any reply. Now, I'm going to verify for myself whether or not it was a dream. Liam whimpered. Caleb, you're an animal. He laughed against Liam's mouth. Yeah, I am.